A deadly hail in Italy, 3 suns in China, and an African continent that decides to split in two? It makes you wonder if the world is still going round. Sit back and relax. Here are some unexplainable things that have happened in the world recently. When you hear about hail, you think nature can be fascinating. And when you get the chance to see a hailstorm, you love to hold the little hailstones in your hand and admire them. How cute. But you have never seen a real hailstorm, the one that when it falls, you think directly of the end of the world. Like what happened recently in Italy. Do you want to get a little taste? Put on your coat and boots. We're going to Milan. As you can see on these images from July 26, 2021, a violent hailstorm hit Milan, destroying cars and houses, stopping traffic on one of Italy's main highways, and injuring several people in the process. Hailstones as big as tennis balls fell violently on the whole region, especially on a part of the northern section of the road between Milan and Naples, which stretches for about 800 kilometers, bombarding motorists who were in the middle of the road. The images that the Italian weather channel Meteo Weather 24 broadcast showed the extent of the damage, apocalyptic scenes, destroyed landscapes, punctured vehicles, and people seriously injured, mainly from shards of glass from exploding windshields. There you have it. You've just witnessed horrific scenes, worthy of a real apocalyptic movie. It makes your blood run cold, doesn't it? It is the case to say it. Fortunately, all this is over, even if we still can't explain why nature was so angry that day. At least now you know that Italy is not always pizza, sun, and lazing around. You're on vacation in Tabasco, Mexico, in a small town called Sanchez Magallanes, and you are staying in a nice little hotel right on the sea. One morning, you decide to wake up early to do a little jogging on the sand. As soon as you step outside, you are surprised to see a tide of thick foam invading the streets. Did they have a foam party last night without inviting you? You quickly get an answer to your question, as all your neighbors are as surprised as you by the inexplicable phenomenon. It was, in fact, a sea of foam coming in from the Gulf of Mexico. It invaded all the streets and continued to spread. As for you, you find yourselves drowned in more than a meter of foam, like all the other inhabitants. At first, you were a little excited and amused by what you saw, but then you saw an old woman in a panic. Your amazement was quickly replaced by the feeling of fear, especially since you had no idea what would happen after this tsunami of foam. The situation could certainly become very serious. Fortunately, the civil protection agents were quick to come to the aid of the inhabitants who didn't know where to put themselves. By the middle of the day, the foam had naturally disappeared without leaving any traces or damage, which was a relief. But this unfortunate episode made you want to shorten your stay in Tabasco and go visit another Mexican city. Now that's what we call a spicy vacation. Ever since you were a child, you were always taught that a rainbow is a bow that points to the sky and is made up of beautiful colors. Now that you are older, you would certainly like to learn something new about rainbows, wouldn't you? Then look at this picture. No, you don't have to turn your head down. You'll get a stiff neck. This picture is not upside down. The rainbow is in place. It was taken by a photographer named Giles Oliver, who lives in Rancognier in the southwest of France. On Saturday at 9 a.m., the man had a strange encounter with an upside-down rainbow. This one lasted for only a few minutes before disappearing. Fortunately, he was able to immortalize the phenomenon, as he was 40 years old and he had never seen such a thing before. As incredible as it may seem, this phenomenon has a name, and it's well known by scientists. It is called a circumzenithal, an upside-down rainbow that appears about 13 times a year in Europe under very specific conditions. The circumzenithal can only occur in the morning or at the end of the day, when cirrus clouds composed of ice crystals are present and the sky is abundantly sunny. If the rainbow you know is formed when light passes through raindrops, the circumzenithal is formed when ice crystals are present in high cloud. Your neck hurts from turning your head upside down, but you'll have to get used to it. Rainbows don't always have their feet down, but you will sleep less stupid at night. You have always heard about Kenya, the magnificent African country with the sumptuous and paradisiacal landscapes. But what you don't know about this country is that it is probably doomed to split in two, not politically, but geographically, and that it would be likely to divide the whole African continent and consequently give birth to a new continent in the world. Would you like us to explain this further? Very well. Then head to Kenya in the Great Rift Valley. In March 2018, torrential rains fell on the country, which led to impressive landslides and subsidence of roads, including the busiest in the region, Mai Mahiu Norak, located in the south of the country, a few kilometers from the capital of Nairobi. In front of the eyes of shocked motorists, a huge fault about 15 meters deep and 20 meters wide was traced from the Gulf of Aden in the north of Zimbabwe in the south, dragging all the muddy water into its depths. Scientists already know that the African tectonic plate separates from the Somali plate at the level of the Great Rift Valley, and this phenomenon extends from the Red Sea to Zimbabwe for more than 6,000 kilometers. Thus, the Horn of Africa, Somalia, part of Ethiopia, and Tanzania have great chances to separate from Africa to form a new continent in a few years. We are talking about 50 million years. They still have time to prepare for it. Seeing such huge holes gives you the creeps. It's scary, I must admit. At the same time, it's a whole continent that will be detached. That's quite something. Fortunately, you and France are far from all that. But if you want to impress your geography teacher and play the ace in geology, you have a good one to teach them. You stay a few days in a hotel in Ribeirão Claro, west of Sao Paulo in Brazil. One day when it had just rained, the rain had finally given way to the sun. You wanted to go out for a walk to discover the city. As you were walking quietly in the park and letting your ideas and eyes run free, they were suddenly attracted by something in the sky, something you didn't even know existed. It was clearly a cloud, but this cloud had the colors of a rainbow. It was unbelievable. You were stunned by such a wonder the whole time it was in the sky. Once at home, you rushed to do your research on this phenomenon. You then learned that it is a very rare meteorological phenomenon, which scientists called iridescent cloud. For an iridescent cloud to form, several conditions must be met. The cloud must be relatively thick and must be at a very high altitude. The tiny ice crystals inside the cloud must be spaced far enough apart and oriented in such a way that a ring of light is formed and thus reveals the colors of the rainbow. The sight of this cloud has made your head spin so much that you are dizzy. But as this phenomenon has a very little chance of reoccurring in the near future, you feel very lucky to have seen it with your own eyes, which is not given to everyone. You are still in Mexico. You love this country so much that you don't want to leave it, despite the history of moss. At this time, you wanted to spend a few days in the capital, a must for the inveterate tourist like you. One day, as you pass by a street, you notice a huge crowd gather around a piece of asphalt. You walk over to see what's going on, and you're as shocked as everyone else. You see a crack in the ground that rises and falls like a breathing frequency. It turns out later that this crack has been created by a terrible earthquake of magnitude 7.1, which had hit the city in September 2019. This phenomenon would be, according to scientists, the consequence of liquefaction of the soil. Indeed, the fact that Mexico City is built on a sedimentary basin and the soil is saturated with water or filled with air pockets could explain that it would tend to deform as if it were quicksand. A phenomenon like this, of course, is very dangerous because in the long term, the liquefaction can cause landslides, the collapse of the ground, as well as certain foundations of the city. You then become aware that you are in danger, and you are taken to such a fright that you suddenly don't want to visit the country anymore, but to return soon as possible to France. Vacations at grandma's in the country can be nice too. You are in the city of Mohe in China. It is autumn and you find the city sublime. You wake up one morning, ready to devour life and enjoy the chance to discover the city. But as soon as you step outside, you look up at the sky and it's a shock. You see the sun, but on the other side of the star are two other suns. You're stunned. You think that you should go see your ophthalmologist as soon as you return to France. But no, you don't have any eye problem, and you are not dreaming either. It is simply a phenomenon called parhelia. It is a rare phenomenon, but it has a scientific explanation. It occurs when the sun's rays pass through ice crystals present in clouds at high altitudes. At low altitude, these crystals tend to melt because the temperature is higher. The phenomenon lasted that day 3 hours and then disappeared. Well, it fascinated you, but it also cost you a nasty stiff neck because you kept your eyes in the air a little too long, and your cervicals didn't appreciate it very much. But since this is a very rare phenomenon, consider yourself lucky to have been one of the few people who were able to witness it. You were in the city of Yalta, Russia, for a few days of tourism because you've always dreamed of discovering the Crimean Peninsula, a place you have heard a lot about. But this morning, as you leave the hotel, just as you are about to start a day full of discoveries, you discover instead a landscape ravaged by floods and torrential rains. Unfortunately, you find yourself in the midst of the floods that hit Crimea in March 2018. You can better understand why last night you had trouble sleeping. So the city of Yalta was hit by a cyclone that led to torrential rains and severe flooding. The meteorological service estimated that last night the equivalent of 2 months of average rainfall fell. Through the window of your hotel room, you look at the scene. Streets submerged by water that go up to the second floor, and some buildings, power cuts, subways engulfed. destroyed streets, people swimming, and monster damage. On television, you are told that the cyclone should last 2 days and start to lose intensity tomorrow. In the meantime, you watch the rescue workers do their job. As for you, you are panic-stricken, and you are at the same time very disappointed not to be able to enjoy your stay. Great vacations. One thing is for sure, discoveries are over for you. The next time you will go to the sun, it will be the Maldives or nothing. So what do you think about these amazing things that have appeared in the world? Tell us your feelings in the comments. And if you like this video, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our next contents.